The gala leader was known as Gede. Gede was the gala leader. So Gede is a Swahili word meaning precious.
Gede or Gedi, as locals call it, is also used as a personal name. It is believed that the name referred to either the destroyed town or the name of the last gala leader to camp on the site. The true name may be Kilimani, the Quillman of the Batholate map of 1639. Welcome to Gede Ruins, an archaeological and prehistoric site that is still an interest to thousands of tourists that flock to Kenya's Malindi town many centuries since its last existence. Do not fail to share your thoughts, views and opinions in the comment section, in addition to sharing and subscribing to more impactful stories. My name is Otieno Mjomba, and this is the story of the Arab city of Gede. The historic site known as Gedi is on the Mombasa-Malindi Road, 105 kilometers from Mombasa City, 16 kilometers from Malindi town, and 546 kilometers from Nairobi near the Indian Ocean. It consists of the ruins of the 15th century Arab African town, typical of several such towns up and down of the coast of East Africa, but the only one which is maintained as a place of public resort. The site is adjacent to the town of Gedi in Kilifi County and within the expansive Arabuko-Sokoke Natural Forest. From the main gate, you are welcomed by the beautiful canopies of different indigenous trees with a chirping sound of birds and monkeys whooping from one tree to another, a manifestation of real life in the jungle. Be wary of the daring primates who are too friendly that can even climb on your back as you walk around the Gede avenues. Some trees in the forest are as old as the ruin itself. Since the rediscovery of the Gede Ruins by the colonists in the 1920s, Gedi has been one of the most intensely excavated and studied of those sites, along with Kilwa, Shanga, Comoros, Manda, and Ungwana. Currently, the Giriama, one of the Mijikenda tribes, maintain a large community around the Gede Ruins and view the site as a sacred and spiritual place. Despite transitions in their belief system and the preeminence of Islam in the region, evil and ancestral spirits are thought by many to reside at Gedi. According to local tradition, the ruins are protected by the spirits of its spirits. These old ones are said to curse anyone who harms the site. The ancient town was and is still divided by two walls consisting of 45 acres outer wall and an inner wall enclosing 18 acres that lie in the primal Arabuko-Sokoke forest. It was surrounded by a wall about 9 feet high with 3 or more gates. As will be seen later in the program, the inner wall was made up of 2 mosques, the Great Mosque and a private mosque, a place of Sheikh's house, 4 large houses, several cluster houses, and 4 large pillar tombs comprising of the urban core. The inner wall enclosed 4 other houses and 3 other mosques. Between the inner and outer wall, few stone structures have been identified except for the two mosques. Immediately beyond the outer wall, there was one mosque and several other unidentified structures. So you might be wondering, what was the main activity that these people were involved in? Well, here it is.
Trade was the main activity that they were doing. So they traded with different countries like Italians, Indians, Spain, and Chinese. So trade was the main economic activity. They participated both in barter trade and international trade. Barter trade, the Swahili Arab traded ivory and hides and skin to those other countries.
Locals say that probably Gede was destroyed by the Mombasa retributive voyage which was sent against Malindi after the destruction of Mombasa by the then governor of Portuguese Asia, Nuno da Cunha, in April 1529. Annihilation in which the people of Malindi had cooperated, and this is because if Gede had been in ruins during the second and third quarters of the 15th century, the period of the Portuguese headquarters at Malindi, it is unlikely to have been mentioned by them. However, from the numerous sheds of porcelain, it is clear that it was occupied in the late 16th century. Both reoccupation and final abandonment were due to the same cause, the southern advance of the nomadic Gala from Somali. In the course of the 17th century, all the Arabs' African settlements on the mainland between the Juba River in Somali and the area of Mtwapa, 24 kilometers north of Mombasa, were abandoned. In the second half of the 19th century, the Gala was in decline. Attacked by Somali and Maasai, they were no longer able to hold the country they had conquered. As they fell back or disintegrated, Arabs from Lamu, under the protection of soldiers from Zanzibar, reoccupied Malindi and other old sites on the coast.
Reason for abandonment is the 17th century number one, lack of water. They head west, but the water from those wells got too salty and later dried up. The second reason, we have an outbreak of a plague-like disease. These diseases were brought by some of the rodents that were exported during trade. I told you these people, they were international traders. So during exportation of some of the goods, the countries involved exported the rodents with their goods. And also we have the conflict between the Swahili Arab and the Gala people. The Gala are Pasolis moving from place to place in search of water and pasture. But when they landed here, they found enough water for their animals. They fought the Swahili Arab that were initially living here and overthrew them. The
Gede, unlike Lamu, Pate, and Old Malindi and Mombasa, was essentially a country town. The roofs were of lime concrete, sometimes with square tiles on the underside, carried on square mangrove poles. The longest span at Gede is 8 feet, which is about the greatest length for which mangrove poles of sufficient circumferences to carry the heavy roofs were easily obtained. The floors were also of lime concrete, sometimes heavily ballasted with coral chips. Cut coral blocks were used for edging of doorways and steps, sometimes of the fine-grained live coral from the sea. The pointed arc, often with 2 vertical stones above the apex on one side, called the inverted Y, is characteristic of the coasts of Kenya and the northern Tanzania. It may be of Indian origin and evidence of the increased Indian contacts of the 15th century. The building material consisted of coral rugs, red earth, and coral lime. The coral was taken from the prehistoric coral ridge which underlies the site, and the red earth was found in pockets overlaying. The majority of Gede structures were domestic residences made of thatched roofs and mud buildings concentrated between the outer and the inner walls. However, the only buildings that survive to the present were constructed using coral stones extracted from the Indian Ocean. You might be wondering how and what is the best convenient way of accessing the town. Then the most convenient way to see the town after looking at the dated tomb is to take the path which goes over the town wall near the fluted pillar. The Great Mosque will then be in front of you, with the palace and the houses on the right. Go through the Great Mosque to the palace, then round the houses, and eventually you will come back to the ticket office. Return to the point near the fluted pillar where you started, but turn left and follow the path which will take you past the house of the door to South Gate on the inner wall. The path continues along this wall, then turns out to the outer wall and back to the southwest corner of the inner wall. From there, you follow the inner wall, pass behind the palace and out to the north gate, returning to the ticket office via the small museum. One of the most interesting things about the Gede Ruins are the wells. And as you're going to see, you're going to understand and learn that there are so many wells that were dug in almost every court. And so how many were they? Listen to this.
Between the outer wall and the inner wall were 28 dug wells, and also between the outer wall and the inner wall were 8 excavated mounds. And also you will see some of the Arabic writing on the wall, meaning that these people, they were Muslims. So here we have the tomb of the fluted pillar.
Inside there is a tomb called Tomb of the Fluted Pillar, and it's just next after the dated tomb. This is one of the forms taken by the pillar tombs which are found all along the coast of East Africa. So why is it the Tomb of the Fluted Pillar? Well, you may ask.
It's known as the Tomb of the Fluted Pillar because it resembles that shape of a flute. Yeah. So this is where the gala leader was buried, the Gedi himself.
Another key attraction is the dated tomb, and this consists of a large oval tombstone with an epitaph incised in plaster, partially erased but sufficiently legible for the date.
This is a dated tomb. It has just been translated. We have 802 AH after Hijra, an Islamic date, and 1399 AD, a Christian date. So these are also some of the Arabic writings of the war.
Another key attraction is the Great Mosque. Built in the middle of the 15th century and rebuilt 100 years later, is a typical East African congregational mosque or Juma. The plan is a rectangular with 3 doors in each of the long walls. It is approached through the courtyard with a well, conduit and cistern at the north end and an octagonal pillar tomb at the southeast corner. Beyond the courtyard is a covered veranda with a small store and a flight of steps going up to the roof, from which the call to prayers was given. On the north wall of the mosque, the mihrab, once decorated with porcelain balls, shows the direction of Mecca. To the right of the mihrab stands a minibar, or pulpit of 3 steps. The roof was supported on 3 rows of 6 rectangular pillars, the middle row running down the center of the building and obscuring the view of the mihrab. This is a curious arrangement only found in East Africa. The square niches in the pillar along the walls are for lamps. Below the rectangular pillars can be seen the square pillars, the original mosque. The partition wall cutting off the rear 3 bays was probably the final modification when the roof had partially collapsed and only part of the mosque was being used. Outside the mosque, on the west, is another veranda, which is an addition. At a distance of a few hundred yards from this side of the Great Mosque is the palace, which, with its annex, covers an area of about a quarter of an acre. The main entrance consists of a pointed arc on a platform approached by a flight of steps with a bench on either side, which leads down to a sunken court. Sunken courts, which served as reception rooms, are a feature of the domestic quarters at Gedi. On the floor of the court are two rainwater pits. These are found in all the streets and courts of the town, and sometimes also in the rooms. To the left of the reception court is a large well and an open court. In the middle is a sump with a larger hole than the rainwater pits, and the court was probably used for washing clothes. A passage leads from the reception court to the audience court. This is a rectangular court running in front of the main block of the palace, with platforms on the east, south, and west sides. Originally, there was a flight of steps in the middle of the platform on the south side, but this was covered up when the palace was extended and the platform widened and raised. Between the reception court and the audience court is a small apartment. It includes a lavatory, which is typical of the restroom at Gedi, consisting of two small cubicles with a low partition wall between them. In one was the pit with a square hole and a urinal channel. In the other, a washing bench with two cavities for balls in an upper tier and a divided seat used as a bidet in the lower. The main block of the palace consists of an outer room with two pairs of rooms behind it. The outer room has a cupboard and niches for lamps in the columns framing the door leading to the inner rooms. In the walls can be seen rows of holes for pegs for hanging carpets. In the walls in between the two rear rooms is a chamber without a door. This was the strong room for storing valuables and would have been entered by a small trapdoor high up in the wall, approached by a ladder. One or two of these doors, with access from one of the bedrooms, are found in every house. Just immediately after the house of the iron lamp is the house of the Venetian bead. This house was a later addition. On the floor was found a small celadon dish with volute edges and a necklace of shell beads with a single glass bead of a type known as Rosetta bead, made in Venice. The ball was properly set in the roof and the necklace was dropped on the day of the panic. The house of the iron lamp is one of the oldest houses of Gedi and was originally approached from the courtyard, which was subsequently appropriated by the house of the Caesars. The iron lamp was found in front room under the debris of the roof. Next to the house of the iron lamp is the house of the Caesar. This house is so significant because of the well that is just next to it. The other room and house is the house of the Cowries. The house of the Cowries consisted of a long narrow court in front, a long room with a lavatory at the end, a second long room and three smaller rooms, which is store, bedroom and kitchen at the back. Subsequently, this plan was changed by dividing the middle room into two and making a house of one long room and two suites of 2 rooms each, presumably for the 2 wives with whom the master was living at that time. The final alteration was a change in the shape of the front court from a narrow rectangle suitable only for a social life to a wide rectangle which could have had commercial or industrial use. From the house of the Cowries comes the next house, the house of the porcelain bowl. Leaving the palace, the first complete house is the house of the porcelain bowl, a small 3-roomed structure with no court and an outside lavatory, built over the ruins of a large house which had been destroyed by fire. Attached to it is a pair of rooms which may have been a shop. In the bedroom of the house was found a large blue and white bowl of the mid-16th century, and among the ruins of the wall of the shop the lid of a dark olive green 15th century celadon jar with a lotus tassel on the top. Both the bowl and the jar may have been fixed in the walls. Another significant house is the house of the cistern. Beyond the house of the cistern, a large building with a square court in front and a cistern room used as a bathroom. On the wall of the outer room are several graffiti including a magic square of 16 numbers and some sketches of those. The cistern room is a common feature of old-fashioned Arab houses, but this is the only example found at Gedi. It seems to have been an amenity that was introduced at the end of the 16th century. The coral tile and the roof are original, but the rafters are modern. There is no drain from the cistern, and the step inside was used when cleaning it out. It was filled from outside by the channel in the wall. Leading off the street, going north is the house of the paneled walls. With 2 large courts in front of it, a door between the 2 middle rooms, and 2 lavatories. On the opposite side of the street is a small mosque, the Mosque of the Long Conduit. In the cistern were found a Chinese porcelain bowl of the mid-16th century and an Islamic polychrome plate, probably early 16th century. On one side of the frame of the mihrab were crutches, several times the Arabic words kulutam, meaning all food. These are the opening words of Quran 393, which deals with the food that is lawful for Muslims. They may be the idle scribblings of a boy when the mosque was being used as a school. It is clear which part of the Quran had the strongest appeal to him. At the end of the back wall of the house of the Venetian Bede is a door leading down a passage into the house of the sunken court. This house is part of the same block as the house of the iron lamp and is one of the most elaborate at Gedi. The passage opens into a small lobby with seats round the sides, from which access to the reception court is provided. An intercommunicating room provides access to the reception court from the kitchen without the necessity of going through the house. In the outer room is a stand for a jar of drinking water with a shelf or cups below it. These occur in many of the houses. The return to the entrance can now be made by taking the street which runs between the house of the cistern and the house of the paneled walls. Before reaching the gap in the wall, the house of the long court and the house on the wall can be seen on the right. Mosque of the Three Isles. This is a small mosque with 2 rows of pillars and the largest well at Gedi. Beyond it is a length of wall with square ports for firearms and the south gate of the inner wall. In the gate are circular siphons from which the approach to the wall may be observed. Further along the wall, a square bastion has been added with gun port and splayed sides to cover an angle of the wall. A path has been cut out to the line of the outer wall and then back to the inner wall near the southwest corner. On the outer wall are the remains of small mosques, the mosque of the wall. The inner wall continues northwards through another house, the house on the west wall, of the typical composite type comprising 2, possibly 3 residences. The wall passes behind the palace and then turns north to meet the outer wall near the mosque of the long conduit. Before reaching the mosque, however, a path is seen going out to the north gate on the outer wall. This is a typical East African town gate consisting of a chamber, probably unroofed, built across the wall to serve as a checkpost for strangers nearing the town. Gede was founded in the late 13th or early 14th century, reached its peak in the middle of the 15th century, and was finally abandoned in the early 17th century. The actual reason for its foundation is unknown, but it is most likely to have been the result of a dispute, followed by immigration from Malindi. It was of no political or major commercial importance and is ignored by Portuguese, Arab, and Swahili sources. However, the quantity of porcelain found shows that it must have had a large and relatively prosperous population. In the 16th century, something seems to have happened which brought its life temporarily to an end. Gede was visited by the British resident of Zanzibar and a companion to explorer David Livingstone.
John Kirk. Excavation took place between the year 1948 to the year 1958.
It was then forgotten for 50 years, but in 1927 was gazetted as a historic monument. In 1939, valuable work was done by the Public Works Department in cementing together the crumbling walls of the more important buildings. In 1948, Gedi was declared a national park and excavations were begun, which were continued until 1958. Responsibility for its administration was later taken over by the museum trustees in 1969.